It's the Final Word Cricket Podcast, Season 15, Episode 31. Adam Collins in London, Jeff Lemon in Melbourne. We have a busy show. We've had the Shield final over the weekend. We've got the Australian women playing in Bangladesh, the England women playing in New Zealand. We've seen the schedule released this morning for the Australian summer, which is looking pretty bloody good if you ask me. We've got a Bangladesh-Sri Lanka test match, which is as bonkers as we thought it was going to be, the IPL first weekend, and so much more. Jeff, good evening to you.
Good evening to you, sir, and yes, a pleasure to be podcasting the great and noble game of cricket once again, as we want to do at least once a week, if not more often.
And Jeff, I come bearing news, news that you know, but news for everybody else, that we have delivered on our promise. We've said that we're going to have more merchandise in 2024, and we said that in 2023 and 2022 and 2021, and we've actually delivered on this thanks to Anthony Costa at Lee Tees. The long-awaited, I got my bowling action tested at the University of WA, as of about 20 minutes ago, is now on virtual shelves. I'm looking at the link right now. I like how they get the AI models involved as well. We've got this chap with blonde hair sporting the shirt. I don't think he just put it on, but here he is. And I love the graphic that Anthony's made up. It's kind of like, it reminds me of that bowling test they did to work out who was the fastest in the world in 1975 or 76 or whatever it was in the background. But with Tomo, that's right. So it's got a graph like that. And then the heat maps where you would be checking to make sure the arm's straight. Yes, we've been talking about releasing this shirt for a while. I suspect it'll be quite popular.
Well, a lot of people want to get their actions tested at the University of WA, and it's a hard road to get in there. It's a long waiting list. You've got to get called up in a very public and humiliating fashion, and then you have to get covered with all of those sensors, like the ones that Murali's wearing in that famous photograph. It's like the motion capture stuff. It's like when Andy Serkis did Gollum for Lord of the Rings. Pretty much the same thing. They rig you up. They put you in one of those weird sort of speed suits. They put sensors all over your body. And then, while he's doing precious and swimming around a lake and eating raw fish, they could also check if there's more than the 15 degrees of flex permissible when he rolls out an off break or the quicker stuff. So, it's an all-purpose situation, and, I'm glad that the Gollum's involved with UWA, and I'm glad that we're now involved with UWA. I wonder how long it takes before we get an injuction sent over.
Don't say that. We've already, it was going to be, I got my, I don't think Anthony would mind going behind the curtain here. We were going to go with, I got my action tested at the University of Western Australia, but that's trademarked, you see. University of WA, who's to know? Time will tell. But buy the shirt while you can. Links in the show notes. We don't do this stuff very often. Others are much better at this than we are. Get yourself some fun Final Word merch. Do it today. The other thing you can do today when looking at that link in our little link tree thing that Cam kindly set up for us before Christmas is our Lord's Taverners fundraising link. I normally would do this in the middle of the show, Jeff, but I wanted to start with it tonight because we had a really inspiring Zoom call last night with about 30 of our 44 runners jumping on and talking about their backstory as to why they've decided to contribute this time and effort to running for the Tabs. It couldn't have gone any better. We agreed to our norms for the group, which is a kind of a common campaigning tactic, I suppose you would say, to make sure we're all on the same page. And we've all agreed to thoroughly rinse our social media networks and get as much money as we can to meet that target of 30,000 quid. So lots of training going on behind the scenes, lots of people telling stories of running through mud, running in the sleet and rain and all the rest of it at this time of year. But yes, the fundraising push in overdrive now, as it will be for the next 8.5 weeks until our first runners take the track at Edinburgh. We've got a couple of marathon runners, including Matt Blacker at London, and Matt is a 3-hour marathon runner, right? So this is pretty cool to have someone as capable as him running with us. Get your donations in. 30,000 quid is the target. You all know why the Lord's Taverners do amazing work in our cricketing community, and this is a really simple and practical way. You can back in all of our Final Word runners, which is a great thing that's going on, but the charity as well.
And we got a couple of big donations in as well over the last couple of days. So getting that thing moving along, go and have a look at the page and see what other people have been doing and see what you're inspired to do. other great achievements in the cricketing community. Tom Downey, who organised our live shows in Melbourne and Sydney in the season just gone, and who we're working with at the moment to put together the hopefully 5-city schedule for the upcoming Australian summer. We were talking about local cricketing success last week. He let us know during the week that he captained Moss Vale to their first flag in a decade. I think he said they're not playing in first div because they've only got a second div team, but it was their first. It was the best Moss Vale team anyway. They bowled out Mittagong for 95. They chased it. They romped it in 38 overs to get those 96 runs they needed for victory, and got their 7 down. So it was sort of tense stuff. But yeah, the picture that he sent through to us was classic kind of Travis Head post World Cup sort of areas where he's pretty much asleep on the trophy after in a fairly late night situation.
Yeah, and the final was played at Lackey Park, which is where Bradman played his first senior game and made his first 100. So I love that link as well. And Tom, in addition to being a great supporter of ours with the live shows, he was also with us in Edinburgh last year playing for the final Wet 11. So I like to think it was that pre-season, those 2 games we played up in Scotland, which underpinned his campaign. I know he made plenty of runs leading the first team there at Moss Vale, and congratulations to them for winning the flag. Staying on local grand finals for a moment, Jeff, I didn't anticipate covering district cricket on the show this week, but I don't know if you caught up with this, the stunning final in the Premier Grade in Victoria, or in Melbourne specifically, over the weekend. This was South Melbourne trying to win their first premiership in the first division since 1967-68. Remembering that South Melbourne,
wow,
I think they're called Casey South Melbourne now, they're a most famous club. They've had so many Australian players turn out for them over the years, but they've had to wait a long time, and they're playing at Windy Hill against the Blue Baggers of Carlton. And Carlton are knocked over for 171. And the Swans in reply make 212. Other way around, actually. South Melbourne batted first. 2-1-2 for them. Carlton all out 171. 3-day final. So into the third day, at one stage, Souths are 3 for 95. Ash Chandra Singh's batting. He ends up carrying his bat for 103 after a half century in the first inning. So you would think from there, they are going to draw this match, but because they won on first innings, they'll get the flag. Not to be. There was a collapse. So Chandra Singh makes 103 not out of 209. It leaves Carlton 250 to win the flag in just 36 overs. So basically one session on the final day of the season. All hell breaks loose. Evan Gulbis and Mackenzie Harvey at 88 runs in the first 9 overs. They hit 18 fours and 10 sixes in their chase. They get their 3 down with 5 overs to go. Gulbis making 62 from 36, had a really prolific career playing for Carlton, but also represented Victoria and the Stars and all the rest of it. He was in tears after the game. Great pictures from him. And yeah, to think that South Melbourne batted for 194 overs in this grand final. Carlton batted for 83, and they've been done reverse outright. The first time a side has been done reverse outright in the first 11 final of district cricket in Victoria for 7 decades. Highway robbery. I mean, it's a remarkable achievement to come from that far behind, and so sad for the Swans. They had some of their premiership players from 67, 68 there watching, who rocked up for that final day and saw them rolled in spectacular circumstances. So well done to Carlton, but got to feel for South Melbourne doing so much right and getting pipped at the post in no field restrictions either. They could have had 9 out on the boundary. Maybe they did, I'm not sure, but one of the great come from behind wins.
Well, Laurie Nash would be furious, the South Melbourne champion from the 1930s, who was more known for getting in punch-ons and trying to knock people's heads off. He'd be wanting to be on the team that played like Carlton did, in taking the game on like that. And Carlton, I've always had an interest in that Carlton club since reading Christian Ryan's piece about Abdul Qadir bowling for them. In the early 90s when he came out and nearly got the season record for wickets playing for Carlton. So, obviously, extraordinary situation. And I suppose, you see teams make 250 in T20 games from time to time, but to do it a few days into a final on a more worn sort of pitch is a pretty remarkable thing.
Yeah, with the stakes so high as well. I guess when you can only bat in one gear, the top gear, that helps a little bit. But such a bitter pill to swallow for Casey South Melbourne, who'll have to go again next year. I know Damien Fleming will be gutted. He's always watching the Casey teams, the South Melbourne teams play on his iPad when covering international cricket. He's always got a keen eye on what's going on a Saturday afternoon. So hopefully they get right back on the horse next year, and Chandra Singh winning the, well, I guess it's effectively the Norm Smith. I'm not sure what they call it in district cricket for an unbeaten carrying the bat century and a 50 in the first innings and a losing effort. Quite remarkable. To the other end of the cricketing pyramid, Jeff, we've just seen the usually where we stuff up our timings on this pod, where there'll be like significant news break like 1 hour after we've hit publish, but we just got in under the wire today on the international summer schedule for 24-25. This is always going to attract a lot of interest, not least because it's a women's Ashes year. They're finally taking it out of cycle with the men, something we've been arguing for years. And India's men are in Australia as well, and Australia get the chance to take on a side that they've failed to beat at home, both in 18-19 and 2021. So this is going to be huge.
Well, it was interesting to get a media release saying that they were playing 5 tests, given that that it was already in the FTP. We know you're playing 5 tests. That's been well and truly advanced ahead of time. The Women's Ashes test at Melbourne is encouraging. They're going to play it as a pink ball game, which I guess you can understand, given that they'll be looking to maximise the chance to get people through the gate, and having the evening sessions in summer sort of lends itself towards that. The annoying thing is that they're still going with 4 days, and hopefully 4 days is enough with the pink ball and so on, but we've seen some very flat pink ball test matches as well, where batting's pretty easy and there's not a lot in the ball. So just the talk about it was, we don't have much of a sample size and all the rest of it. Well, you do have a sample size, which is 10 years of 4-day test matches that kept being drawn, and plus another 60 odd years before that as well. There was so many draws. In women's tests used to be mostly played over 3 days, and it was very rare to get a result. But we've seen so many draws, and then we see one 5-day test in Nottingham last year, which goes the distance into the 5th day. There's always that possibility in Melbourne that you'll get some rain, especially if it's the evening. You get an evening thunderstorm, you wipe out a few hours from your 4-day test, and suddenly it's put a massive dent in the chance of getting a result. I can't see the value in whatever the economising is of lopping off that 5th day. Like, how is it worth not having the possibility to get a result? So that's the really frustrating bit with that. But at least it's a test match at the MCG, and it's high billing in a big summer where there are 5 tests against India, which will be a huge, in terms of promotion and PR and stuff, it's going to be a massive summer on that front.
I expect it's probably to do with them trying to get out of cricket and into whichever concert they'll hold at the MCG in mid to late February. It tends to be an annual thing now. I think it was Ed Sheeran 2 years ago, of course, Taylor Swift this year. So they try and, I guess, bump out from a cricket perspective as early as they can to facilitate the gig. But the 4-day test match ending on the 2nd of February. The first time they've had a women's test at the MCG since the 40s, so that's significant. So they're backing in the bigger venue and trusting the Melbourne crowd to rock up. And look, we know they did in that T20 final back in 2020. This is different. There won't be 86,000 people at a test match. I mean, there isn't for men either, so it's not like for like. But, a generous crowd will be a great thing to see at the G, and trusting the product in such a way, and not sort of being sheepish around playing it in a venue that can feel cavernous when it's even half full. So often they'll close off the top deck when there's a game that's not attracting a huge crowd. But I think that's just a nice, not even nice is the wrong word, it's a positive step that they're not just playing women's test cricket in smaller venues. It's ending that series, so they're going 1 day as first, starting on the 12th of January. They're being played at North Sydney, the Junction Oval and Bell Reef, so smaller venues for the 1 dayers. Then into the T20s. SCG, Monaco and Adelaide, so slightly bigger venues for that, and finishing with the test match. I don't think we've ended on a test match in the multi-format era, Jeff. My recollection has been that the test has been played either first or second, so maybe that's one way to have the maximum number of points available in the final game. I would prefer them to not be playing for 4 points. I'd rather it be an extra point there to make it an odd number, but at least going last, it can mean a side could come from behind, whereas it's been much trickier in the past.
Yeah, I suppose it raises that possibility of, the side that knows that it can win the series with a draw, playing a much more dead hand kind of approach, and that's the thing that they've wanted to avoid, wanting to put it earlier in the series for that reason. It was first in 2014 when England won it at the Wacker from memory, and it's mostly been second since then. They played the 50 over games first, certainly in 2017 in Australia and 2019 in England, and then last time around they had the T20s first, didn't they? When England were last in Australia, most of those got washed out.
I think they started with the test, actually. I think they started with the test there with a view to trying to generate most interest. And that worked in Canberra. That was a terrific test match that went all the way to the death.
I think they had the T20s in Adelaide. They did the three, and two of them got rained off, and then they went to Canberra from memory, but I might be misremembering.
Oh, right. Okay. Anyway, that's on the men's side of the ledger. I mean, there's a bit going on here, right? So first thing to note is that the story was out there about 24 hours ago via Malcolm Com that they're actually looking at releasing a 6-year schedule, so more in line with what we see in England, where we know a long way out where the test matches are going to be played. And in keeping with that long-term deal, Perth has sewn up getting the first test every year. And it sounds like this will kick in for the Ashes summer of 25-26, where Adelaide will get what they're calling the Christmas test match just before that, so that'll typically be third. It'll mean Brisbane will no longer be the first test of the summer, where traditionally it's been situated for decades. Not every year, but more often than not, Brisbane's been the first test of the summer, partly to give Australia that comparative advantage on a ground where they've typically enjoyed so much success, although they've lost 2 of their last 4 there. But until that, before the loss in 21, you got to go back to 1988-89 when they lost a test there. But that's more to do with the commercial realities. I think that they are backing in Perth, who, we know that state are so invested in trying to turn that into a important part of the calendar. You start the summer in Perth, haven't had the crowds as yet, but that's what they're hoping for in the next 2 years. Adelaide have earned the right to have choice, I think, Jeff. Like, they should decide where they go because in addition to Melbourne and Sydney, that's become the most successful test match of the summer over the last 20 years or so. And Brisbane going through their ongoing dramas with the Gabba, not knowing what it's going to look like. That's getting squeezed into probably second spot, so not a huge problem for them. It'll only adjust things by a week or so, but no longer having that pride of place at the start of the summer.
Yeah, I guess the other factor is that if you're Cricket Australia, you can't be absolutely sure that you will be playing at the Gabba over that 6 years. It depends on the state election. It depends on what happens with the stadium plan. The original stadium plan was knock down the Gabba and rebuild it, which meant that cricket and Aussie rules were both going to be moved to temporary homes for several years while they did the rebuild. And so if you know that if there's a chance of getting a second choice or a subpar venue for the test, then why give it first billing in the summer might be part of the reasoning, I suppose. It'd be interesting to know what else the case was that Perth made, because, for all the fact that we've enjoyed poking a bit of fun about the attendances have been dreadful, and you see, just compared to, say, Adelaide, Adelaide getting more in 2 days than Perth got in 4 or 5 the previous couple of times they had. Over this last summer, Adelaide were into the 50,000 mark after a couple of days of their test this year. So there is a difference, like all parochial rivalries aside, there is a difference in the quantity of the crowd that's willing to turn out. And that's what I'm most interested to see, actually, is what happens when, India got a game at the new stadium in 2018. England still haven't played there. What happens in these next 2 summers when those high drawing teams come? Do we actually fill the stadium at Perth for an Ashes test? Is it not quite that many? It'd be curious to see what the ceiling is and what Perth can turn out.
Yeah, I can tell you why. It'll be cash. I hear you want to give
cash chopper.
Cash, Neville. That'll be why. That'll be why Perth have been able to put themselves in this situation where, well, as we know, I'm drawing a bit of a long bow here, but it doesn't feel like Queensland are flush with it at the moment. We'll see. The other bits and pieces from the schedule that are... Oh, by the way, it's starting on the 22nd, the Border Gavaskar series. And as we said before, it'll be in Perth. Then the 6th of December will be in Adelaide. The 14th of December, the Gabba. And then, of course, Boxing Day. And Sydney's on the 3rd of January, so a little bit earlier than the last 2 times that India were out there. they're bringing that forward. And by deduction, I'm looking at this, seeing that there's no white ball stuff afterwards for the Australian men. So there is white ball stuff for Australia in the November against Pakistan, and the Australian women play white ball series against New Zealand and India across September and then December. But that month of January is Women's Ashes, and it's Big Bash. And we've heard on the grapevine that the Australia-Sri Lanka, or I should say the Sri Lanka-Australia series, is going to start right at the tail end of January, possibly the first week of February.
Yeah, right.
For 2 test matches as part of the World Test Championship. So that kind of lines up, I reckon, that you'll see the high-profile Australian Test men play in the Big Bash for a couple of weeks, and then they'll head off to Sri Lanka, and we'll get kind of what we had this year. We'll have that extended summer with a couple of Test matches in February, akin to what we just finished up in New Zealand, which is a good thing, I guess, that we're seeing that accommodated.
Well, that's what you want to see, right? That's what you want to see. The perfect preparation for going out to face Prabhath Jayasuriya in Gaul is to get a couple of games in for the Renegades at Cardinia Park. Just make sure you're middling your cow corner game so that you can take on Sri Lanka when they're turning at 45 degrees.
It's a fair point, but I'll just present the other side of it. The Big Bash, look, I don't profess to know a lot about the Big Bash, but those who do tell me that the TV numbers are radically different when the Test players are in. So I get that, right? That they'll give them that window between, let's say, the 7th of January and, like the 15th of January. You might see some Test players running around before they go out to Sri Lanka. I don't know whether they'll play a tour game or an intra-club or something before
I doubt it.
First Test match, but you're right. It'd be sensible to have some kind of preparation before playing Sri Lanka. You wouldn't want to get caught on a snake pit, which could easily happen if you've not been preparing against it. That's it in terms of schedule bits and bobs, I'm pretty sure. Jeff, I think what we should do next is move to some Nerd Pledge. And on the other side of the first break, we can talk in depth about the Sheffield Shield. Stand it back right to you.
All right, let's do it. Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge, the game we play with nice people on the internet who fund this program. They are the reason that this happens every week, multiple times a week. In fact, they send in contributions in a currency of their choice, in a number of their choice. The number relates to cricket in some way. We have to figure out what it means. Adam Danish Babar is our Nerd Pledger this week with £8.64 in pounds, £8.64. So that is the number. It didn't have a clue as far as I could tell. It did have a very interesting quirk, though, Adam, which is the sort of thing that you will probably enjoy. So this 864 came in last year, and it arrived. And unless Danish Baba had an ability to foresee the future or some connections that were able to do a very good job of arranging things, Danish couldn't have known this was going to happen. It arrives 3 days later. Nathan Lyon takes 8 for 64 in the indoor test to win it for Australia. The second time in test history that anyone had taken 8 for 64, and it happened 3 days after the pledge had arrived. I thought you'd enjoy that.
Beautiful. We often say it. We couldn't make these things up with the way in which the numbers come in and the dates they arrive at. It's quirky. It's freaky. But thank you, Danish. That's very generous. And that means by extension, you're not allowed to talk about Lions 8 for 64. That would be unreasonable, given it was it doesn't line up with the time frame.
No, so it can't be that. It's got to be something else. It could be, given it's in pounds, it could be the innings analysis in which Gareth Batty took his hat-trick for Surrey. We talked only a few months ago, I think, about his test arc to the point where he played test cricket again in 2016. His career best first-class figures was that analysis, 8 for 64, which he took 3 years after his last test. So it was 2019. He was 41 years old. I spent some time today watching back footage from that game. The interesting thing about this, the 8 for 64, is how low-key the response is, and the almost complete lack of celebration. So, and it's curious when you get the context, because you read figures and you go, well, 8 for 64, he's had a day out, must have been, on top of the world, everything's great. Not exactly, because you forget about the game that's happening at the same time. So in this match, Surrey are trailing after 2 innings. They get bowled out for 188 and they're 105 behind. And so Gareth Batty's bowling in the 3rd innings, trying to keep Warwickshire from getting to a strong lead. And he gets the first 2 wickets to fall. But Warwickshire go on to 103 for 2. at 1 point. So they're more than 200 ahead and only 2 down. And they're batting to set a target. They're playing attacking shots. And so, the first couple of wickets to fall have been sort of probing LBW, left arm spinner, classic type stuff. There's a catch that goes to slip. And then the next 5 to fall are all just happy slapping, hitting down the ground, hitting the ball straight to catches, trying to get quick runs to move towards a declaration. So, it's horrible batting, but also there's basically no jeopardy for Warwickshire. They don't really care. They're happy to lose wickets chasing runs. They don't really make any runs from this point. At one stage, they lose 5 for 11. But also, the price of a wicket is now low, so they don't really mind. And he cares less than anybody. I think the signature moment of this is that when he takes the hat-trick, it's the last 3 wickets to fall in the innings, and the third of them, down to long on, he just turns around, watches it get caught, crosses his arms, stands in the middle of the pitch, and then just slowly wanders off looking disgusted. It is the least excitement you will ever see. I reckon even Stephen Finn at the MCG was more excited about his hat-trick in that 50-over game than Gareth Batty was when he picked up the hat-trick here.
Very on brand for Bats. Very on brand for his personality that despite picking up an 8 he'd still be pissed off about something. So I'm not surprised to hear that.
Well, so I said they were the last 3 to fall, but the quirk is that at this point Warwickshire are still only 9 down. So they're 166 for 9, and they declare, which I think is a bit rude when a guy's just taken a hat-trick. You rob him of the chance to take 4 in 4. But they're 271 runs ahead. They figure that they're in with a great chance to win it, and indeed they go on to do that. So Batty, 8 for 64, fine. Jeetan Patel goes on to take 8 for 36 and win the game. So way to feel even less excited about the 8 for that you picked up when someone else outdoes you. In a heavy loss, they lose by 130 runs despite that bowling innings. So, yeah, there are the bits you don't remember when you look at the scoreboards. I mentioned Lyon in tests. It's never happened in women's tests. The other time in men's tests is Lance Klusner, which could well be the answer, the intended answer for this question. Yeah, on debut, Eden Gardens, 1996. Bowls India out for 137 in the 4th innings with heaps to defend, 400 plus. What I was interested in here is they talked a lot, if you read the contemporary reporting, it's about it being the best ever figures by a visiting bowler in Asia, which is quite the thing to do as a South African seamer on debut as well. And so when Lyon got the same figures a year ago, you might think, oh, he's matched that record. He's also got the best visiting figures in Asia. Not by a long chalk, because in between Klusner and him, well, you've got Stuart McGill in Bangladesh and Jason Frazier in India, who take 8 but more expensively. And then in Dubai in 2016, Devendra Bishu, whose work we enjoyed plenty of times on this show over the years, the West Indies leg spinner, takes 8 for 49 against Pakistan. This is a quirk. So if you go looking for away figures, best away figures, you won't find Devendra Bishu's analysis, because technically it was a neutral venue because it was in the UAE against Pakistan.
Was that the first? I feel like that's the first day-night test outside of Australia. I think from memory.
Yeah, sounds right.
I think that was Azhar Ali triple ton jumps out at me. I think that was all in the same match. Anyway, something like that.
I think it must have been the same one, because it was definitely a West Indies game. Bravo made a big score as well, I think. The UAE being neutral thing also potentially discounts Yasir Shah from the away figures premiership, because he took 8 for 41 and went better than Bishu with 8 for 49. That was in 2018. You can also categorise that differently, because Yasir Shah's an Asian bowler in Asia. So if you can categorise it as bowlers from outside Asia coming to play well in Asia, which is a little different. But Asian bowlers in Asia, you've got Sajid Khan, who also takes 8 for 42 in Bangladesh.
Yeah, I think on this, I often find myself when prepping for test matches going through and, crunching away numbers versus home numbers and all the rest of it. I go to the extra effort of including the neutral test matches in a way.
Same.
Take the World Test Championship final last year, Travis Head, his 100 at the Oval. I mean, it's unreasonable to call it anything other than an away 100, right? I know it's on a neutral venue because they were playing India, but yeah, I think that for the purpose of what you're doing here, I know that it was a home fixture for Pakistan by dint of the fact that it was their home ground then, but I would say that Yasir Shah, I wouldn't count that as away. I would count Travis Head as away. I mean, it requires a bit of jiggery pokery, but I'm sure you know where I'm coming from there.
I'm with you on that because Pakistan got to play there for so long, and they spent a decade where that was the only place they played cricket. Their players got to get used to it, so it became a de facto home venue, even though it wasn't technically their home venue. Whereas if you're playing somewhere that neither team ever plays, then you could really call it away for both, I suppose. It's away from home for the team that's doing the scoring, even if it's not against a home team. Any rate, those from outside Asia, you've got Nathan Lyon with his 8 for 64. The only other person who betted it, aside from Sajid Khan and Yasir Shah, who were from Asia, the only person who betted it was Nathan Lyon himself with 8 for 50 that he took in 2017. So he's got two of the best visiting analyses within Asia. But anyway, they were all in a race about how many runs they could concede while taking 8 wickets and who was in the best position. And then Keshav with the $ Maharaj comes along. The South African spinner takes 9 for 129, goes top of the list. And then he gets bumped off in 2021 when Ajaz Patel for New Zealand takes 10 for 119. So Ajaz Patel will be hard to dislodge from the best visiting bowling figures in Asia with 10 in the innings, given that's only happened 3 times in the history of Test cricket. Maybe, who knows, maybe Danish wanted to hear more about the Klusener Day itself, which is an extraordinary day to end a pretty interesting Test match. But I got sidetracked into the way that the record has moved. So let me know, Danish, if that answer satisfies you or if we need to look more at what Zulu did on debut.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about tenfers here, right? So I was at the commercial club when Ajaz Patel took his tenfer. I think you might have it as well, Jeff. It was one of those matchups
that's right.
I would do before Christmas. And I was quite emotionally affected by that. It's a big deal. It just does not, as we know, how infrequently 10 wickets has been taken. And when you were answering that then, I just went and taken a look. It's happened 91 times in first-class cricket where someone's taken all 10. And I think we're up to 76 ties in first-class cricket. So, in your rarities and oddities pile, when you consider how much first-class cricket's been played, to have only happened 91 times, and then, of course, we know that we know the Test cricket story as part of that, how small that is. And similarly with ties, 2 ties out of the 76 or 67, I can't remember now, but it's about that. That should be. I know Ajaz Patel's career hasn't kicked on in a way. He's only picked in Asia, but regardless of how it all ends for him, he'll go down as having one of the rarest achievements in Test cricket. I think it's pretty cool.
If you want to send through a nerd pledge, go to patreon.com/thefinalword and you can help us keep making the show and you can get involved with this game. A lot more of that coming up on Storytime on the weekend. A friend of the show, Matt May, is going to have a number on Storytime this weekend, Adam. Brace yourself for that. He's usually better at solving everybody else's. If you want to get yourself a VPN as well, that's a thing you can do through us, so you can get the 4 months free deal. NordVPN for cybersecurity and privacy. You can do a lot of things. You can shield online activities from your ISP or hackers. You can encrypt your connection to make public Wi-Fi networks safer. You can use threat protection to scan files that you download. You can block ads, avoid malicious links, and get alerts from the dark web monitor if your info ends up in the hands of hackers. I love the sound of the dark web monitor. I've got like a vision of what they look like sort of shrouded in a big black cape. You can't see their face. Sort of somewhere between a Nazgul and a Dementor, which is probably the same idea anyway. One of them ripped off the other, I suppose. Yeah, but that's the dark web monitor. They know what's going on, and they will keep you posted.
Is it an elected position? That's what my mind went. Can you put your hand up and run for it? I want to be the dark web monitor at school. You can become the SRC president in one ballot and the dark web monitor on the other. That might be something they require at schools these days. Who's to know? I was going to log into my NordVPN before, Jeff, but I didn't have to. Weirdly, I was on an airline's website, won't say which one, to try and because once these dates become available to us and we know where the international summer is going to be, for me anyway, the first thing I think about is bloody hell, better get the flights sorted out before they all become ridiculously expensive. My expectation was that I have to pump open Nord and get it in the currency that I would like. And it didn't need to. The airline's website did it for me. But usually that's an example of where I would take advantage of Nord and make sure that I am in the right part of the world according to the VPN or whatever you call it, virtual private network that I'm in at the time. So that's an example of many ways you can save money using Nord. NordVPN.com/TFW. They've agreed to work with us for the next few months, which is terrific. So if you're on the fence and thinking about it, get your 30-day money-back guarantee. You'll support the show. You'll support yourself. You'll help save a few bob along the way, I suspect. NordVPN.com/TFW. That link is also in the show notes. All right, Jeff, we're taking a break and we're returning by talking about the Mr Sheffield Shield. Final word, Adam Collins, Jeff Lemon, WA have done it again. They're three-peaters, as was said about Hawthorn in 2015. Three-peaters in the Sheffield Shield. They've won 8 of the last 9 trophies, the WA men, when you fold in their Big Bash titles and their success in 50-over cricket. It's dynastical. It's sensational. It's all under the coaching of Adam Voges, who took on that job not long after he retired from professional cricket and captaining his state. As Ben Horner was reporting yesterday, Jeff, with Andrew McDonald having 24 months left running on his contract, and McDonald's been pretty clear that he's not the kind of guy who wants to do the Australian gig forever. Voges is putting himself front and centre.
Yeah, which is interesting. I suppose there's that through line from that very successful era that Justin Langer had with WA, and Voges being able to perpetuate that. One of our patron followers on the Discord chat page was putting up a graph suggesting that Cameron Bancroft is if I can use an Ian Healyism, the winningest domestic player in over the last 15 years. A lot of Big Bash titles, a lot of Shield titles, 50 over titles. They've been winning everything, but Bancroft I think has played in more of those wins than anybody else in the current WA setup, but wasn't in the winning team here. I mean, still, played in the winning campaign and was a huge part of WA's success, but ended up with a concussion after falling off a bike. So that's an unusual one to miss out on a Shield final. But yeah, I mean, that didn't set them back. They just ploughed on. There's something so remorseless about that domestic setup at WA, the way that they've just been able to reload every year and go again.
Incredible depth as well. You think about the players they could have selected from. I saw one report saying that there were up to 10 players who could have been eligible for that first team, for that that Shield final team, but weren't for one reason or another, including the captain Mitchell Marsh, who is over at the IPL, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, in the absence of Bancroft, there's Sam Whiteman, acting captain, loves a Shield final. They had a wicketless session off the top there at the Wacker against Tasmania to set their week in motion. Batting with Darcy Short, bit of a forgotten man of Shield cricket, I reckon, or domestic cricket, Jeff. He had that period of time when he was being picked for both the Aussie white ball teams and had that extraordinary couple of years playing for WA and with Hobart in the Big Bash. He's 33 now, and he made a half century and even 50 on day one of the Shield final from 127 balls. So I guess it shows that he had variety and depth to his game that we probably didn't see when he was playing for Australia in short form cricket. But yeah, batting with Sam Whiteman, who for the second time in a Shield final has posted 3 figures. He's your classic boom bust guy. He makes a lot of ducks, but a lot of tons as well. So yes, that century got them in the right direction. And their first innings, which it wasn't at any risk of falling off a cliff because of the foundation they laid, but they did lose a bunch of wickets in a hurry, and they were 5 for 215. So, you can see a world where Tasmania have got their mojo. It's taken them a while, and look, maybe they run through them and bowl them out for 260, and it's a game in balance. And that's when Cooper Connolly walks in on debut. He gets brought into the 11 because Cameron Bancroft's not there. 20 years of age. We saw what he could do on the big stage in the Big Bash final earlier this summer, so he knows what it's like in a situation like this. But he rattled off 90 from just 115 balls in his first Shield innings, and that he was 10 runs away from becoming the youngest man since Phil Hughes to make a Sheffield Shield final 100. So a terrific effort to get them up to 347, the home team, and from there Tasmania were always going to be in a spot of bother.
Yeah, well, I mean, 347 as the home side, you've got that sort of that aura, I suppose. It's your pitch. You're not playing in the UAE. It's not a neutral venue, and Tasmania were nowhere near it. I mean, must be such a deflating end to the season for them. I mean, they got bowled out for 186 here. They batted a long time. They batted 92 overs to do it. I mean, you look at the strike rates as you go through. So Caleb Jewell, 45 from 116 balls. Charlie Wakeham, 30 off 93. Silk 30 off 112. Like they're all just sort of crawling through the day, and you could there's that sort of stick or twist bit, I suppose, about things aren't going well, and so you just try to bunker down a bit more. But then each time a wicket falls, you've gone nowhere essentially, and like having already botched it the previous week to blow the home final, like that must be so disappointing. You know, while we were in New Zealand, Xavier Doherty you talked about Fleming watching games on his iPad. Doherty was sitting there watching Tassie on his iPad and squawking and yelping as you know, close things went one way or the other, because they had the position to host a home final. In the end, they have to travel away, and I mean they end up with such a significant deficit on the first innings, and it's Rockacholi going to work doing the work, the spinner who's, you know, increasingly getting talked up for someone who's pushing for national honours. You know, I remember us mentioning him on the show for the first time a while back and trying to work out the correct Italian pronunciations, and we were putting a lot of syllables in there that aren't supposed to be there. We've figured it out now that the CH, the Italian CH is the K, and the double C is the ch, as in like your focaccia versus your Chianti.
Yes.
But so Rockacholi is the better way to do it, or Rockacholi if you want to do it in an Australian accent.
Yeah, I was quite keen on it being Rockacholi, but yeah, Sav Rockacholi we'll have to do. And you're right about that limp way Tasmania batted. Like, you know, they played such positive cricket through the season. Remember when we did our preview show with Louis Cameron, and Louis watches more Shield cricket than pretty much anyone for his job at cricket.com.au. He's like, you know, just on paper, they should be nowhere near it, and they'd lost players to the mainland and so on, but I guess it's in keeping with the vibe of Tassie and Tassie sport recently. It was such a big week for Tasmanian sport. We mentioned last week the naming of the Tasmanian Devils, who will be their AFL team and their inaugural jumper, and up to 150,000 members. The Jack Jumpers, that extraordinary win at Melbourne over the weekend in the NBL finals. And yeah, unfortunately, the Shield team couldn't get anywhere near it here. Rockacholi, as you say, 4 for 48. He looks good, you know. I watched a bit of him bowl. He's tall. He gets drift and he can turn it. It's a nice combination. So we all take it as read that Todd Murphy will be the successor to Nathan Lyon. That's excellent competitive tension. Rockacholi, who's I think 26, I think I'm right in saying, he's taken 47 wickets in the campaign. Todd Murphy hasn't been as effective this year as last year, although acknowledging that Murphy has now had the experience of Test cricket, which is important. And then there's Matt Kuhneman, who took a fifer in indoor. You mentioned that indoor Test match with Nathan Lyon before. Well, he took a fifer on day one there and was the third spinner in India this time last year. So that's a good thing for Australian cricket. The other person who helped initiate that collapse for Tasmania, they were 4 for 141, all out 186, so they lose 6 for 45 by my maths there, is Cameron Gannon. Now, I'll look. Cam Gannon, he was the USA opening bowler for a time there before COVID, playing associate cricket. He was at Queensland, of course. He's played for a whole slew of BBL clubs. Got brought back into the Shield team for that Junction Oval game against Victoria a couple of weeks ago. Takes a fifer, and then finally gets his chance to play in a final. I was thinking, you know, he's kind of the Matt Spanger of Shield cricket, having been around so many successful dressing rooms but never getting to play in a grand final. Well, he made it count here. 3 for 38 from 20 in this first innings. And then in the second dig, WA predictably run up the scoreboard and set Tassie loads. They make 376, so it was never really in doubt. Hilton Cartwright, top scoring with 94, all that experience in his early 30s now, been playing for WA for a decade. There are 5 scores in the 20s through to the 40s just to make sure there was never a collapse like we saw with Tassie. But Gannon makes a contribution there as well, making 42. And then Tassie was set 538, a number that has come up quite a bit on the pod of late, actually. I know, Jeff, we've had that on time a couple of times. And with the US political
Nate Silver
to that number as well. Nate Silver, quite right. And, Tassie get rolled for for not many. They get bowled out for 160 odd, and they're defeated by 377 runs. But it's Gannon again, who takes Pfeiffer, finishes with match figures of 8 for 61, in addition to 42 with the bat, and he isn't player of the match. They still give it to Sam Whiteman for the 100 on day one. But yeah, it was such a comprehensive performance from WA, that last wicket with Gannon getting the edge and Joel Paris diving across, taking an absolute specky in the gully. Rockacholi taking 3 more. Poor old Matthew Wade missing out in both innings of his final first-class game, and that being the end of his red ball journey off to the IPL and probably back to the World T20 squad. But Tassie were just monstered in the way that so many teams have been over in Perth over the last 3 seasons.
Well, I've just got to pull you up on one thing, though, because he did play in a Shield final in 2013, Cameron Gannon. He was playing for Tassie back then. Do you remember, if you go back long enough, I'm trying to think who else is in that team. I reckon Ponting's still playing in that side at the time. George Bailey's playing.
That's the Tim Payne-James Faulkner partnership, isn't it? That's right. Payne and Faulkner put on 200, and it basically gets Faulkner into the test squad, and it's just when Payne's making one of his myriad comebacks from broken digits. And Gannon's in that team, is he?
Gannon's in that side. I remember watching him bowl.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't.
They end up drawing. It's against Queensland, isn't it? And I remember watching him bowl sort of in the dead last bit of the game. Tassie were going to win with a draw, so that's how it ended up playing out. But yeah, he's you mentioned him moving around the country so much, and that's just another example of it.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, I'm looking at the card now. He did play. So, a career. That's
who else was in that side? There are some weird players in that side. Tell me who's in the 11.
Let's go through it. Jordan Silk, who is still bashing around as captain of Tassie. Mark Cosgrove was opening the batting for Tasmania at that point. Alex Doolan, who ended up in the Test team only a few months after this. No, a year later.
Yep.
A year after this in the South Africa series. Ricky Ponting batting at 4. George Bailey, the captain, at 5. Jono Wells at 6. Tim Payne at 7. Then James Faulkner, Liam Butterworth, Evan Gulbis, who we mentioned earlier in reference to a District 1's premiership. He was in there, and so was the big German disco, Ben Hilfenhaus.
Loves winning flags. Evan Gulbis loves winning a flag. Nobody likes it more.
Had a good game too. Gulbis took 4 for 62 in the first dig. And yes, they ended up Tasmania. They drew, but they had a better record. They were higher up the table. It was being played at Hobart. So that's the most recent time they've won the Shield. It wasn't to be this week, but yeah, side that was nowhere making the finals. It just feels like, if things break differently, they're getting that home final. Victoria botching their chase at the Junction Oval. They end up level on points with WA in the regular season. One more bonus point in this Shield finals being played, not at the Wacker, and that's clearly a big part of WA's advantage. But what a team they've become. I was thinking, Jeff, about how WA could be tested. We've talked on Storytime in the past around that game, that one-off game that was played between Victoria and Essex after they won the Shield in 1990-91. I think we spent some time talking to Merv about it at the pub one night, didn't we? Back in the 2019 World Cup.
Yeah.
Flemmo played in it as well. And, there actually is a world where this could happen, right? So Surrey have won the last 2. WA have won the last 3. Why not have the county champion play the Shield final winner next week? So after the Shield's finished. I know it competes with the IPL, but the IPL players aren't playing for the most part in the Shield final anyway. They've already departed. It doesn't need to necessarily be the best 11. Why not take a side from Perth over to England in the week before the Shield to play the champion of champions in England? And maybe it could work the other way. Every second year, the county champion could come over to Australia before the start of the Shield and play there. That would line up timing-wise. And it'd be a nice sort of set-piece annual event. I reckon it's the sort of thing that could work really nicely in a global game where the world feels pretty small, and we have this in every other form of the game. Why not the 4-day stuff?
Yeah, if the Leeds Rhinos can take on the Melbourne Storm, which may or may not have happened at some point or thereabouts, then why not this? Look, I like the concept. I like the ambition. I think it'd be a bit stiff if you were, if you're the team that hasn't played in 5 or 6 months, coming up against the hardened team that's just come through a season and won the flag, there might be a little bit of advantage, disadvantage there. Maybe the team, if you swap it, the team that's just finished the season is then the one that travels away. But your other issue is you're potentially missing some players, right? Because you finish a season and then lists get changed and players get dropped off and so on. So it wouldn't necessarily be the championship winning 11.
I'm less worried about that. That's true, but I mean, take Surrey right now. Surrey will play. We're about to talk about the county championship. May as well segue there now. Surrey will play a 3-day game starting on Thursday. I think I should know this really. I'm there on Thursday.
Yep.
I'm not commentating, but I am there. I think they're playing Kent. You know, Surrey every year play a game in this weekend. Every county does, right? This is the traditional warm-up weekend. I know it's bloody cold here, and it'd be very different conditions to Perth in March in South London, but I don't know. I think this could work. And it could be at the other side of the season. It could be that the county champion comes out and plays the pre-season game. I reckon it would do pretty well online, and there'd be interest in it. We know that people love following 4-day cricket, so and it wouldn't necessarily need to be restricted to those two teams. But given that the seasons end and start, and there is this gap at either side of it, it's been done before. As I said, Essex and Victoria played a one-off game in 1991. Let's campaign for it on the final word. Speaking of the championship, as I say, it's back next week. It begins the Friday after this week. I think I'm right in saying.
Must mean we're starting a new season.
Alec Stewart. It does, yes. This will be the penultimate episode of season 15. Although this could be what do you reckon, Jeff? Should next week be episode 1 of season 16, given it's the week of the championship starting and the Australian season's finished, and will be in April? It should be, shouldn't it?
This week is still an Australian season week because we're talking about the Shield final, and then next week we should start over.
Good. I should have led the show with that, saying it's the season finale. It's been a big season, but yeah, in England, Alec Stewart, who's been the director of cricket at Surrey since 2013. We've really, really wanted to get him on the pod for an awfully long time. It feels like a bit of a missing piece. We've had so many players of that England dressing room join us, but maybe this being his final season at Surrey, we'll get that opportunity. They've won the comp in the last 2 seasons. They're going for their own three-peat, and Alec was pretty clear in his statement that the time has come. His wife's been battling cancer for a long time, and as part of that and spending more time with his family, he feels like this is the right time to hand the reins over. But he's been just an absolute giant, and the operation they've got at Surrey, and I fully acknowledge that I work there, so I'm going to declare my bias on that front, and also that Surrey are blessed with resources that many counties aren't. But once they walk through the doors there at the Oval, it's a machine. It really is in 4-day cricket, and Alec's been right at the front of that. So congratulations to him at the end of a long stint and one more season at the helm.
Well, I don't work at Surrey, but I can say more objectively, I've got a lot of admiration for Alec Stewart. He's still one of the most intimidating people in the world of cricket. You know, anytime I'm in the same room as him, I'm slightly frightened. But he's just like it's just something about the way that he's managed to stay so much fitter than anybody like 30 years younger than him. You know, you're like he could call out any of the members of the current squad and shred them on laps of the Oval or whatever. I have no doubt whatsoever. I have no doubt he could like roundhouse kick me through a window if he wanted to, but he hasn't, and that's to his credit, because many have wanted to over the years. It'd be something pretty remarkable if he could pull off 3 in a row. But it's a long stint there, including the times when he's been dragged into umpiring in the middle when they ran out of when he had to go to square leg and all of the other above and beyond sort of stuff that he's had to do for Surrey. A bit less admirable at Middlesex, mind you. One of your other employers, some of the time, that they've signed up a gambling company to put on the front of their shirt. I know all the football clubs are doing it, but somehow it seems he thought maybe cricket was holding out. Certainly not in South Africa, where every fucking team is named after a betting company now. But it's filthy cash, and it's I guess it's the kind of thing that a team with problems with its finances is more likely to do. But it's a cop out. Yeah, look, they're not the only county that have gone down this route. But it's just something about it jars that, playing their home cricket at Lord's with a huge betting sponsor on the front of the shirt just doesn't feel right. And maybe that's me being prudish, I don't know. But it just doesn't
connect. And I know county clubs are under all sorts of financial constraints, and not least Middlesex, which has been well documented. In football, as I understand it, there's a bit of self-regulation where Premier League clubs no longer are allowed to have the main logo to be a betting shop. I wonder whether cricket might do a similar thing at a professional level to preclude this kind of advertising. I know that it's very hard bringing money into first-class cricket. I know they're under enormous pressure to make the books add up. Middlesex did declare a profit last year for the first time in a long time. That's to their credit, having experienced so many challenges in the last 10 years. But yeah, still, it doesn't feel right. And hopefully there's a way through in concert, I suppose, with the ECB about getting rid of gambling advertising in such an overt way. Just one more thing on England, Jeff, before we jump off. There was a really interesting interview with Rob Key in the Telegraph on Friday, I think it was, and how he's seeing the England team under McCullum in the next phase, which starts, I suppose, this summer. He's quite happy with their batting. I suppose that's mostly about how they've batted at home and across the last 2 years, but a big emphasis on bowling, specifically fast bowling, saying that they need to have a group of guys that can bowl between 85 and 88 mile an hour to be successful long term. That's the numbers that he's identified. They're using these cameras on the front of the umpires' helmets to judge that when watching county cricket. So they're talking about, Josh Tongue, Bryden Cass, Matt Potts, Gus Atkinson, even John Hull, the Leicestershire 19-year-old giant who did so well in the Metro Bank last year. So that's on one side of it. Jofra, can Jofra get back for the Ashes? All of this fast bowling emphasis, and then giving Ollie Robinson a bit of a boot up the arse as well, I think, to say that, to use Key's words, he's one of the best bowlers in the world at 83 mile an hour, but not at 75 mile an hour. It's clear what we need and what we need him to do. So, there's an emphasis on Robinson being more consistent. But, it does feel, Jeff, that they're now going to try and transition their bowling stocks. I do wonder what that means for James Anderson. I don't think they'll... I don't think it'll be the case of just leaving him out of the next test squad, but maybe we're reaching that stage with Anderson if they do want to get these quicker guys in with test matches under the belt before they go to Australia in 2 years' time. And I know that's silly to always reference Ashes to us, but it's inevitable that they will and we will. That it might be that Anderson does get asked to consider how he might see this summer of 2024, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, look, it'd be funny if Anderson suits up again and comes back to Australia. You thought I was dead. More returns than Michael Myers at this point. But I think there's still room for, yes, you're looking to your next generation. You want your young quicks in. That doesn't mean you want 3 young quicks in. It probably means you want 2 per test match, and you've still got room for a wily old stager, which means there's a James Anderson job or a Chris Wokes job available. I suppose there's Mark Wood as well, who's who might be more ad hoc available but he has been more consistently available the last few years. So, but they probably want a couple of spots for that next gen of players to come through this season. Across 6 tests, they'd want to get sort of 12 tests into a collective of 2 or 3 emerging bowlers. You would have thought.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think they just want to use this summer they don't want to get caught out with, they have Broad, Anderson, Wood, Leach, Wokes being their attack through the Bazball era for the most part. They want to try and start moving on from that. The other thing with their spinners is they're considering taking them away during the season rather than playing county cricket. They're like, no, we'll look after Shah Bashir and Tom Hartley, and we'll basically, if we need to, we'll do match simulation stuff. We'll take them overseas, and it doesn't sort of. It doesn't sing the praises of county cricket and spinners, but they're I suppose, taking the bigger picture or looking at the bigger picture and longer-term run lead with those guys when they and who knows who might end up being the number 1 spinner for England this year. And one last thing out of this was that Key saying that Freddie Flintoff could be the next coach of England post McCullum. I know that Key's best mates with Flintoff, and that's worth noting on the way through, but Flintoff now back within the England cricket camp, having suffered that horrific injury as part of his television show a couple of years ago, that they feel like he might end up right within the England setup to the point where he could be the head coach. So that was pretty interesting, I thought.
Yeah, the England spinner thing is like, well, if you're not going to eat your dinner, I'll take it away and put it in the fridge, sort of situation. If you're not going to use your spinners, we'll take them on a holiday. It'd be nice if McCullum he just takes them to Venice and they just hang out and have some Aperol spritzers by a canal or something. No bowling. Don't worry about bowling. No. We know you're a good bowler. We just need to relax and make them feel loved. But yeah, they'd feel more loved than sitting on the bench, being second string at a county side that doesn't even pick the first string spinner. So that's all going on in England. The Bangladesh-Sri Lanka test, we should look at that briefly. If you didn't listen to Storytime on the weekend, you might not have picked up on the fact that Wanindu Hasaranga's supposed return to Test cricket, the leg spinning all-rounder, we suspect was a total ruse. He made himself available for the 2 tests so that he could be suspended for those 2 tests and soak up the suspension for his 8 demerit points for abusing an umpire, and thus not miss any games at the T20 World Cup. So I somewhat doubt we'll ever see him be available for another test series after this one. He wasn't available for this one because he was suspended. But look, nonetheless, Sri Lanka bossed it.
This was a wild test match, Jeff. Sri Lanka batted first. This is in Sylhet.
Sylhet.
I always get the pronunciation right. Sylhet. I always sort of second guess myself there. In Bangladesh, put it that way. And Sri Lanka are 5 for 57. Enter new captain Dhananjaya. First test in charge. And at 5 for 57, Kamindu Mendez is in with him as well. Kamindu is remember the COVID call-ups in 2022, Jeff, when we were in Gaul? Kamindu Mendez was the guy who came in and batted at number 6, who didn't have a whole lot of first-class form to go on, but they selected him. And he made 61 there in a really important partnership with Chandimal. Well, this time around, with his new captain, they've put on 202 for the 6th wicket. They both make centuries. Indeed, they both make 102 exactly. Kamindu, they're registering a century in just his 2nd test innings. Dhananjaya, a ton in his first knock as captain. And his 11th in 53 test matches to that point. Spoiler, it becomes 12 by the end of this conversation. They go on to get 280. A lot of people were communicating with us on social media and on Discord, including Andrew Nixon, asking about the partnership Bannerman, given they put on 72% of the innings runs in that stand, and doesn't quite get there, but it's pretty close. Stuart Broad and Jonathan Trott added 74% in their partnership against Pakistan at Lords in 2010. And there was a 75%er in 1967 at the Oval where Asif Iqbal made 146 at number 9. Intikab Alam made 51 at number 10. But it's right up there. And then predictably, Jeff, Bangladesh, having done all that good work with the ball to get Sri Lanka 57 for 5, completely shat the bed, all that for 188. And then Sri Lanka, they were in a spot of bother again the second time. They were 64 for 4, then 126 for 2. But it was the same 2 guys, Dhananjaya and Kamindu, walk out with Sri Lanka needing runs, and they put on 176 for the 7th wicket in the 2nd innings. Dhananjaya, 108, twin centuries on captaincy debut. I can't imagine that's happened before. I reckon if it had happened before, we'd know about it. And then Kamindu makes another 100 himself. So he makes 162 from 300 minutes at the crease after his 102 in the first dig. Only the 3rd time in Test history where 2 players have made twin tons in the same match after the Chappell brothers
on the same team
in 1974 on the same team at Wellington. And it's happened one other time as well. There was some shithouse bowling from Bangladesh. I tuned in to watch Kamindu move to 100. It was total buffet stuff as Bangladesh capitulated, and Sri Lanka ended up getting 418 and setting them 511. But yeah, Bangladesh were unable to put in a consistent performance. And these 2 blokes, twin hundreds for both of them, and historic in both instances.
We were commentating the other time it happened. Azhar Ali and Misbah ul Haq in 2014 in the UAE made twin tons. So that's players on the same team. There've been a few times with players on opposing teams. If I can remember them, Warner and Coley in Adelaide in 2014. Andrew Jones, the New Zealander, and Sanka Gurusina in the 90s. And there's like an Ashes one from the 50s. Is it Dennis Compton and one of the Australian, Arthur Morris maybe, do it. So there've been a handful, but not many, and not many on the same team. So yeah, kind of bonkers stuff, and it all fits into this narrative now of like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka is some of the most entertaining cricket that you can possibly come across.
Did you see Lytton Duss's dismissal, chasing 5'11"? Did this come up in your feed?
It did, yeah. First ball.
Dooly. Lytton Duss, who we really like. We really like Lytton Duss, but at 37 for 4, charging the first ball and getting a huge top edge. It was described in one feed that I saw as the worst shot in Test history, which is harsh, but it might be on the podium. They were 51 for 6 and all out 182. Mominul Huq, who's been a guy I've backed in a bit over the years, made 87 not out, batting at number 4. But yeah, that Kamindu performance in his second Test match. So he's now got Test scores of 61, 102, and 164 to start his career. He could pull the pin now, and he'd still be behind Curtis Patterson, I suppose, Jeff, but not far behind with an average of 109. But I'm sure that won't be the end for him. Only 25 years of age, heaps of time on his side, and Bangladesh, what can you say? They just don't have it in them at the moment to win competitive Test matches. They need everything to go their way, which is odd because 5 or 6 years ago they seem to have turned a corner, but I'm not sure.
Yep.
I'm not sure where they're at, and they really do fall away. They've got a couple of, as Norcross pointed out, a couple of tailenders who are just so shit-house, including Nahid Rana, who was making his Test debut here. How's this? Nahid Rana, according to Norcross, has now gone 18 first-class innings without a run. He's been dismissed 12 times in 74 balls. So, they're a little bit 5-out, all-out Bangladesh.
Yeah. Well, 12 times in 74 balls, it's only once every 6 and a bit balls. Could be worse. That's all I'm saying. Could be worse. We need to take a break, and then we've got a couple more games to look at and the IPL.
Final segment of the final word of the final episode of this 15th season. We're going to stay in Bangladesh, Jeff, just quickly. You watched the first one-dayer at Dhaka on Thursday between Australia's women playing their first ever bilateral series in that country. I tell you what, Bangladesh gave it a shake early on with the ball. They really put Australia under pressure before sadly falling away.
Yeah, I was hopeful for a little while, but I mean, not too hopeful. So, I mean, first of all, I suppose in a way, fair fucks to the BCB for getting the game on YouTube because nobody was willing to screen it. So none of the, we're the future of cricket broadcasters in Australia were willing to put this series on television. So the BCB pulled something together and managed to stream it online. It was pretty ropey early on, I'll tell you what. They must have had techs running around behind the scenes panicking. The mics were blowing out. There was feedback and interference on the lines. There were, you could hear everybody talking in the background. It was kind of all over the place. But it got better as the day went on. So respect. We know what it's like trying to pull a broadcast together at the last minute.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, Bangladesh were all over them early. The Australians couldn't get the pace of the pitch. It was bloody slow. The ball wasn't coming on. It was hard to find boundaries. They missed Healy a couple of times. Could have been out a couple of times early. But Phoebe Litchfield's out first ball. So Sultana Khatun, who's an off spinner they're using as an opener, bowls are an absolute beauty around the wicket that skips on and takes the off stump. Perry gets out, nicking 1 for 2. Healy makes 24, but it's dicey and eventually gets out. Mooney looks like she's going to bat through. She gets to 25 off like 66 balls, I think it was, thereabouts. But then she falls. Talia McGrath's out cheaply. Gardner looks like she's going to save the day, but gets out for 32 and she's scoring slowly. And so it gets all the way down to Annabelle Sutherland and Alana King, and then they just pulled it out of the fire. So, and I mean, King batted 4 sixes off the last over of the game, but it was more about the 50 that Sutherland was able to put together, 58 not out. So, Australia could have been all out for kind of 130, something like that. They ended up making 213. I did think that even once they got to 150, they were likely to win it because Bangladesh don't chase well and just struggle batting against quality bowling sides for the most part. So, without being condescending, anything over 100, you're a very good shout to beat Bangladesh women chasing in 50-over cricket. But they did some really good bowling, had some good moments in the field. Marufa, who's opening, who's the only seamer in the side, was swinging it and was an absolute gun in the field. She was everywhere. Nahida Akhtar, the left-arm orthodox spinner, was impressive again. So, They got everything right for 50 overs, and then they just fell in a heap with the bat. And then, similar story in the second one day. They batted first and they were all out for under 100 both games. That's always the weakness in the Bangladesh women game.
Yeah, two different teams. I mean, you mentioned Nahida Akhtar, right? 2 for 27 from 10 against Australia. Like, she's quality and still young. I looked at her numbers. She's taken 53 wickets at 22 in one days and 86 wickets at 16 in T20 International. So, yeah, you're right. There is this difference. When you're facing Bangladesh, it's hard yakka. When you're bowling to them, not so much, unfortunately. So they bowl them out for 95 in 36 overs. That classic Australian squeeze. Gardner 3, Garth 2. Then King comes on and takes 1 for 12 from 10 overs to complete her player of the match effort after her 46 not out.
Phil Simmons.
Balls. And then in the second, quite right, what's even more pronounced in the second one-dayer, where Bangladesh are bowled out for 97, a shambles really. They're out there for 44.1 overs and only get to 97 all out. Sophie Molyneux, 10 overs, 5 maidens, 3 for 10 with 53 dot balls, which is quite remarkable. So, effectively unhittable, the Australian spinners. And then, Gardner, King and Wareham pick up a couple each, and Australia knock off their target of 98. Just 4 wickets down in 23.5 overs. Perry not out 35 at the end, batting with Ash Gardner. Litchfield missed out for a second time in the series. Mooney missed out as well. Healy's got a couple of starts. So they've got the chance to play a third one-dayer, then 3 T20s, so that the Australian top order, who've yet to fire as yet, will have plenty of opportunities in Bangladesh, where the T20 World Cup is later this year. Speaking of T20 cricket, Jeff, that's what's been played between New Zealand's women and England over the last week or so. We've already talked about the first T20 last week on the show. The second was at Nelson. England won. They made 149 for 7. Heather Knight, back-to-back 50s, quick 50s as well, 56 not out from 40 balls for the English skipper. New Zealand were restricted to 134 for 8. Bell took 2 with the new ball, and Charlie Dean, who I love the work of, also picked up a couple. But then New Zealand won the third. A really good game of cricket, looking back through it and reading some of the commentary here. So the White Ferns made 155 for 3. Sophie Devine, who missed the first couple of games returning from the WPL, made 60 from 37. Mealy Kerr made 44 for the second time in a row. And then England lost... Dunkley run out for a duck. Sketchy start. Tammy Beaumont keeps things together at the top of the list. She's back in the T20 side, which has been a point of interest for a lot of people who've been tracking Tammy's work in the 100 and in other T20 cricket, how she's been missing out on selection. Well, she made 37 from 34 at the top with great support from Maya Bouchier, who was terrific again in the top order. Very promising her rise. She top scored with 71 from 47. But they're absolutely cruising. They need 30 from 30 with 8 wickets in hand to clean sweep it, and it somehow gets down to the final over with 8 runs needed. So they've just been smothered from nowhere. And there's a concussion sub required as well. So Sarah Glenn dropped a catch earlier in the game and hit her head on the turf at mid-off. They bring in Holly Armitage, who is making her debut, who, by the way, she's had a great few years playing for the Northern Diamonds in the Rachel Hayhoe and in the Charlotte Edwards. So I'm really glad to see she's getting her England cap. But there's now a little subset, isn't there, of cricketers who've made their international debut as a consequence of being either a COVID sub or a concussion sub, and Armitage is one of those. So she comes in halfway through the game, but unfortunately isn't able to influence that final over. She's bowled by Susie Bates, who gets thrown the ball, Jeff, 8 runs to defend, hasn't bowled in the game. Who do you throw it to? Susie Bates.
Got one shoulder
Why
that
not?
works.
Not even the shoulder she bowls with. She bowls Armitage with her first ball, and Dean and Gibson can't get her away and gets Dean with the last ball of the game where they need a boundary to win. They don't get it. The over has 4 runs made and 2 wickets taken. So Bates is the ice woman. Susie forever. New Zealand lose the series but win the last game. Not lose the series. Sorry, there's 2 more, isn't there? They're playing 5 T20s, so they could still win at 3-2 and a few one-dayers after that. And they're at the Basin this week, which again is a part of this idea of playing more of these women's internationals on the high-profile venues, which are typically test venues for men. So it's a good thing that they'll be at the cradle of New Zealand cricket this week at Basin Reserve in Wellington.
Have they? So did they play the University Oval game yet in Dunedin? So they were at Nelson. What was the first one?
I think they go to Dunedin. I feel like they go to Dunedin after Wellington, but I haven't got it in front of me. But they are going there too, where New Zealand's men played a test a couple of months ago.
And where Bharat Sundaresan and I dropped by University Oval to visit because, of course, we had to, and got chased off the centre square because we went out to have a look at the pitch, and they were like, "Oh, we've got a game here in a couple of weeks, you dickheads." And we were like, "Oh, sorry." Yes, White Ferns expected. Bharat was just giving me an in-depth discussion about the technique of opening your foot to the leg side and how to access mid-wicket.
Love that.
So, Anyway, so apologies to the ground staff at University Oval. Beautiful, absolutely perfect, picture perfect out there. That brings us to the last bit of the show. It is the final word IPL weekly wrap, because we don't watch enough of it to do this more than once a week, but we did see enough of it to do this once a week. Here we are. This week, Adam, was the comebacks week. It was the start of school term, but everybody was back. It was Rishabh Pant being back. It was Virat Kohli being back from the birth of his second child. It was Dinesh Karthik coming back from the commentary box. Mitchell Starc coming back from many, many years of self-imposed absence from the IPL. Let's start with Rishabh, because we're big Punt fans. Up, down, wherever they are, we like them. Look, he only made 18 and they lost, and Sam Curran and Liam Livingstone sort of did an England job for Punjab over Delhi, where at Delhi, interesting kind of strong Australian slant. Warner and Marsh are opening the batting. It's quite a fun team. Ishant Sharma bowling, Kuldeep Yadav bowling. But more than all of that, Rishabh Pant batting, captaining and wicket-keeping. This was kind of the surprise. I wasn't sure that he was going to be able to keep, given the injuries from his car crash. And he looked okay. I mean, obviously doing a 20-over game is a very different thing to sort of keeping for 2 days during a test match, but he moved all right. He seemed to be getting up and down okay out of the squats. The stumping was the most exciting bit, because that was fast reflexes down the leg side. He's off balance. He has really quick hands to get the bails off. He took a reasonable catch running around off the top edge as well later. Do we dare to dream that Rishabh could be the same force that he has been if he makes it back to the Indian side?
I think that it's going to come down to his keeping. It's going to come down to whether, because he's going to be a different player, right? Like, it's impossible to go through a life-changing event like that and be the same cricketer. I think that it's going to depend on him. I suppose they've got some cover now. We've had Jurel come in and keep so well for the Indian national side against England. But if Punt can make himself a real force with the gloves again, that will fast-track his return, I think, to international cricket. So, but yeah, thrilled to see him back in the IPL in the first instance. And there was a time there, wasn't there, Jeff, that it was no sure thing. I remember when we were in India this time last year talking to some of our commentary colleagues, and the prognosis wasn't great at all about what he might be able to do for the rest of his life. So we've all seen the training videos. We've all seen the social media that he's been putting up along the way, and the incredibly positive attitude he's retained all the way through that. Out the other side of it, playing cricket again within a couple of years, it's a special moment for anyone who's watched this prodigiously talented guy get about over the last 10 years or so.
Virat Kohli back in the runs. It's been kind of extraordinary that, he missed that whole India series. He's been basically 2 full months out of the spotlight, which seems even more significant for someone who we're used to being the centre of attention all of the time. There is no bigger player in world cricket at the moment. I thought it was interesting that he mostly got left alone. Like, everybody knew that he was absent because he had a baby coming, and sort of guessed that there were some complications around that, but there was a lot less reporting on it than I expected there might be. Largely it seemed like his family was left in peace, which was heartening, I suppose. This was the game that Royal Challengers Bangalore were playing against Punjab. Johnny Bairstow didn't make any opening, and also dropped Kohli at slip very early on, one that went over his head to the boundary. Glenn Maxwell picked up a couple of wickets, including Shikhar Dhawan, who was well set. Punjab set 177, and Kohli, so he nicks that one that goes for 4. Then he hits 3 more boundaries in the current over, and then he takes down Kagiso Rabada. Coming down the pitch a lot, he was hitting over cover a lot. Like, it was very aggressive, and we're used to seeing Kohli often ticking along at a slower rate in T20s. This was, the 50 came up off 31 balls, I think. It was a lot more deliberately aggressive than some of the T20 batting that we've seen. And he just looked clean. He looked absolutely mint. Like the break seems to have done him some good. I was very amused at the stat they were putting up about the fact that he'd hit 654s in the IPL. Who cares? Like talk if 150 doesn't mean anything, 650. Just wait for 700. 700 will be along any minute now. Like let's just do even hundreds from here on. 650 come off it, but. He did make his 100th score above 50 in T20 cricket, which is pretty extraordinary. 8 centuries and 92 half centuries as he got to 77. It was a big run chase. They needed 177 to win. He got him pretty close, and it still needed some finishing. So Mahipal Lomro, who's an interesting entry, who's a fairly low-profile player, made 17 off 8 at the end. And Dinesh Karthik, 28 off 10. And this was kind of another comeback because DK had a poor season last year, couldn't get any, and he's going to be 39 in a couple of months. He sort of had that feeling that maybe last year was his last season, and he'd gone one too many. In the end, he looked immaculate. The way he finished the game off, 28 off 10. He was hooking them over fine leg. He was playing his lap shots. He was drilling them down the ground, and he looked terrific. After you might have expected that he'd transitioned his career to commentary from here on.
I think there was a general view out there that he was done, but to make a contribution in both games and that terrific chase that the RCB had yesterday about, it's, I guess, demonstrative of the fact that the IPL does still, if you've got that eye, if you've got that ability, not just the IPL, but T20 cricket more generally. Andre Russell showed up playing in a T20 against Australia a couple of months ago down in Hobart, Jeff, and I'm like, I thought he was well and truly done, but
yep,
it's the fast twitch fibers and other things that we say we don't quite understand, which give extra longevity to players who, if they were asked to play a 4-day game or a 5-day game, would probably struggle with that at this age. But 20 overs, if you've got it, if you've got the eye still in good nick, then you can still do it. And so it proves for DK.
Well, Andre Russell, will come to him in a moment. So Punjab won all after they won the first one against Delhi and lost the one to Bangalore. Bangalore won all because they lost their first game to Chennai, where Maxi made a golden duck. Not the way to start the season. Also, fairly funny, MS Dhoni, just before the Chennai game, retires as captain of CSK, like a day before the tournament starts. He still plays. He's going to play this season. He's just not captaining. So he takes a couple of catches, a run out, not required to bat. But my God, like this was so MS Dhoni. You remember his very enigmatic retirement in Australia halfway through a test series as test captain. Remember how close-lipped he is about everything. It's like he just really enjoys not telling anyone what's happening. He's the most emotionally unavailable cricket captain I can think of. Like, you talk about insecure attachment styles and being an avoidant personality or whatever it is. He just spends all year going, oh, no, not sure. Yeah, no, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll let you know. And then a day before the season decides that's it. I can't decide if it's just amusing or annoying. So Ruturaj Gaikwad's been made captain, but like, with no time to settle into it. Normally, your new captain, you'd have the run up to the season, you'd do your press events, it'd be like, it's your team now, what are you going to do with it, what's your style? No, just the day before the game, you've got the armband champion, enjoy.
He'd be a terrible person to be in a relationship with. He's that classic kind of treat him mean, keep him keen kind of character. He's not who you want as your high school girlfriend, MS Dhoni.
So anyway, look, they're the very New Zealandish team at the moment. CSK, they've got Rachin Ravindra and Daryl Mitchell playing for them. Rachin started pretty nicely, hit a few sixes, 37 off 15. Kolkata Knight Riders. Mitchell Starc made history as the most expensive signing in the history of the comp, and then didn't quite make history as the most expensive spell, but not that far off. 53 off 4 overs, mostly thanks to Heinrich Klaasen, who did most of the scoring in an over that went for 26. They hit 4 sixes in that over with Shahbaz Ahmed helping out. And this is after Andre Russell in the first innings had gone absolutely nuts to set Hyderabad 209. So Russell playing for Kolkata sets him 209. He makes 64 from 25 balls. Klaasen makes 63 from 29, chasing, nearly gets there. They need 6 from 4 balls. And Harshit Rana is the unenviable task of bowling that last over, gets both set batters out when they needed 6 from 4 to win, like after having just been flying along the previous few overs. Pat Cummins has to come in to face the last ball of the game, needing 5 to win. So he has to hit a 6 first ball, his first ball, last ball of the innings, to win the game, and can't do it miraculously. Swings and misses because finally there was a chase that he couldn't ice. KKR win by 4. But yeah, Russell back in at class and still being one of the best there is in the middle order, and Stark having a very forgettable outing in his first game at $4 million plus for the season.
Yeah, you made the point there, but if I was putting the bat in the hand of one person to nail a 6 from one ball at the moment, it probably would be Pat Cummins. Not because he's the best player in the world, but he's just got an immense ability to absorb pressure and deliver. And he's done it before in the IPL. He hit that 13-ball 50, wasn't it, a few years ago, which was backs against the wall stuff. And we've seen those last ball 6s in the IPL fairly routinely. I remember one night with Mitchell Sartner pulling it off as the CSK from memory, and Ravindra has done it a number of times, but not to be for Cummins. But I wouldn't say it's jarring that we're seeing these Australian Test cricketers playing in the IPL. We're conditioned to it, but it does feel a million miles away from where we left them in Christchurch a fortnight ago.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's so recent, isn't it? And to us, we're like, okay, that part of the season's over, time to have a bit of a rest. And for them, they're into the cauldron, in the middle of like the most watched cricket happening in the world, basically the most intense thing, probably outside of the World Cup final that they played last year.
Yeah, there's only one thing more intense than playing in the IPL cauldron. It's playing in the IPL cauldron, coached by Justin Langer, who has started in his luck. Although I did see his promotional video that he put up on social media last week. I think they were playing a Pracky match, Lucknow, and Langer had the hat on backwards and was encouraging everyone to get down and get funky and all the rest of it. But it didn't start the way they wanted when the real stuff began.
No, he was very happy for KL Rahul to be back. Our captain's in the house. Well, KL Rahul did make runs, but made a 50, but wasn't enough to get past Sanju Samson, who continues to impress. Made 80 plus in quick time for Rajasthan. And Lucknow start with a loss, and the Gujarat Titans beat Mumbai despite Jasprit Bumrah pulling out 3 for 14 from 4 overs. Pretty extraordinary in a high scoring game there as well. So that's it. Most teams have played 1, a couple have played 2.
Has Bumrah ever not done that?
Yeah.
It feels like Bumrah, every T20 game he plays, he finishes with 3 for 14 from 4, right?
Just about. He did go. There was that one-day warm-up match for the World Cup where Mitchell Marsh and co took 50 off his first 5 overs, and it was absurd. It was like, I don't know, tuning into the moon landing and seeing like Mark Cosgrove up there or something. It was like, hang on, this doesn't compute. This isn't supposed to happen. This is not what I was expecting.
I'm just trying to think what Mark Cosgrove's first words upon touching the moon would have been. I doubt it would have been as one small step for man, etc., etc.
Fucking grouse.
Final word, listeners. What would have Mark Cosgrove's first words have been upon being the first man to set foot on the moon? Maybe not a bad place to leave the podcast this week.
Yeah, why not?
To leave the season. Look, this has been the final word. It has been season 15. Just want to say on the way out of this that we're very grateful that we get to make as many episodes of this podcast as we do. 32 in season 15, but that doesn't count. How many daily shows? Was there 50 odd? Something ridiculous
more
like
than
that.
that.
It's at least 50. It's probably like 60 or 70 daily shows. And when you fold in the 99 episodes that are all turned around and the archive eps and the book club eps, which we don't count in that. Speaking of book club, that's returning.
Adam, the World Cup was in this season. Just before you get onto that, yeah. So the World Cup had nearly 50 daily shows in and of itself, plus the home summer, plus the New Zealand trip. We're probably at 100.
So home summer, let's do it. Yeah, I was going to say, we might as well work it out and be self-indulgent at the end. If you're still listening, you'll allow us this indulgence. So there would have been, 50-odd World Cup shows. There were test matches between Australia's men and women. They played, 6 in the home summer, I think, from memory. Mm-hmm. So, you throw in a few previous shows, 40-odd there. New Zealand, a couple more test matches. Yeah,
England, India.
It's over 100 comfortably. England, India, Christ, maybe even close to 150, maybe closer to 150 than it is 100. Someone will work that out. We're nearing 1,000 episodes ever in the history of the show, which I find it hard to believe, but we'll recognise that at the right time. But still, the wider point I was going to make is that to make 100 plus, let's say, daily shows and all of these programs, all the story time research, all of the stuff behind the scenes to turn around stuff like 99 and book clubs and so on and so forth doesn't happen without our incredibly loyal bank of patrons, and we do thank you for being there with us for years. In the case of some of you, I mentioned last night that we had this catch up for the Edinburgh Half Marathon and what we're doing with the Lord's Tab. So many people said they started listening to the show only in the last couple of years, so it's an audience that continues to grow and swell, and we're proud of that. So if you want to keep supporting what Jeff and I are doing as this increasingly becomes our full-time job, no, scrap that, it is our full-time job. Patreon.com/The Final Word. If you are listening and you have a commercial interest in what we're doing, this is a really, really good time to get in touch. finalwordcricket@gmail.com. Drop me a line and we'll talk. Thank you to everybody who's supported us commercially through the summer, which of course is Seabus Super and Westfield and NordVPN. You can get the NordVPN deal by clicking the link in the show notes. Donate a few bob to the Lord's Taverners as well ahead of the marathon. I think that's everyone. Thanks, Jeff. I think it's time for us to put a pin in season 15.
That's it. It has been a season. It has been one of the 15 seasons. What to make of it, I don't know. As the players like to say, I'll look back on that in a few years and maybe enjoy it then with a quiet beverage. All right, that's it from us. We'll see you later.